Hello everyone, I'm Marcus. Welcome to the Bridge, or we're calling ourselves Bridge Plus, which is, we are part of a Sanderson Bridge group. So we're traditionally a corporate real estate solution provider. So right now you're part of a facility which is also our co-working space. And we have a co-working center just down the way, and then we have these shared facilities. And I think you can call us, in a way, our business is in the business of developing communities, or we're monetizing it through co-working space right now and shared facilities like this. And we're very fortunate that over the past year, we have built tracks like a group of blockchain companies within our space. We also have a group of sustainable growth companies here, championing all corporate good local changes, things like that. And also we have a bunch of corporate innovators like Yogi Film Lab, and also our own Maker championing innovation and work. So welcome to this place. I feel very proud to be here, standing here, because I'm also a student of analytics and data science. I went back to school anywhere about 3 years ago to understand why people like to learn to become machines. So then I understand the whole concept of machine learning, and it's quite interesting, you know, that we're able to bring people around here to do this. I'm not a practicing professional, but I'm still deepening my learning every day, trying to understand what it means to apply analytics to our field of business. And real estate is also a field which I'm looking at opportunities to work on that. So, and I guess it is important for us to create opportunities like that where we gather people to really not just learn ourselves, but also share some of the deep thoughts and also the consideration of how we advance this subject and also its application to the different industries. So I'm looking forward to the sharing, and thank you AXA and team for coming over here. Thanks.
Thanks Marcus, and thanks Bridge for sharing the value. Next, to introduce our speakers, I'll introduce Anko, Director of REV, AXA, Research, Engineering and Vision. Over to you.
You got it absolutely right. I was thinking that it would be a little bit tricky to understand what is REV. So we represent a research team, a research engineering vision team of AXA. Right now we are based in AXA Tower. We'll be moving very soon to the Bridge. So we are very thankful to Bridge for allowing us to have this venue today, and also to the Data Science SG Meetup Group for making sure that we can promote this event and we can have this talk. I also would like to thank Marcin and Choki, who have basically accepted our request to have this discussion with all of you. And lastly, I would like to thank all of you for attending this event. I hope it will be interactive and it will be interesting for you. And when we are in Bridge, I'm hopeful that we'll be doing more and more of these kind of events and activities to be able to participate in the ecosystem. So just to share a few lines about REV, but I would let Marcin, who's our Chief Data Scientist in AXA Group, to introduce that more formally, and Choki, who's an Innovation Manager at REV, to briefly talk about what is our mission. So our mission of our lab, Research Engineering Vision, is to really help AXA in becoming a tech-led company by looking at new technologies, looking at machine learning at scale, and by also experimenting on new business models. So we look at these things and we continue to explore new areas. One of the dimensions of that is to really look at research, pure research, academic collaborations. So those are the areas, including being responsible for all the data scientists in the group. We have Marcin and his team. So we have the pleasure of inviting him today to give us his vision about how he's considering humanizing machine learning, how he's looking at this kind of topic from an interpretability of models to really AI topics. So I would let Marcin introduce himself, because he said I would like to introduce myself, so I would let him introduce himself. Can we have Marcin, please?
You know, actually, when I saw this paper, it's a paper on Nature, 2017, I thought when I was back at the university, I went to, for my postdoc, I was in Berkeley, and we were trying to classify some simple images, you know, a car versus an elephant. And so it's a two-class problem, and my accuracy was like 60%, and I was like, yes! Okay, so when I think this, when I see this, I don't know how many of you know this paper. Okay, nobody knows this paper. So this paper is a fantastic thing. This paper was published by the guys who actually run the autonomous car program at Google. The guys have no idea about anything. You get a lot of data, you do some deep learning, smart deep learning, and they are able to do two classification tasks. One classification task around epidermal, okay, epidermal cancers, the malignant versus the benign version, okay, and then a very, very dangerous cancer. This is the most common one, and then a very, very dangerous one, which is the melanocytic cancer, which is very dangerous. And it turns out that this algorithm is as good as 20 dermatologists together. 20. And this is 2017. I mean, we're really living in a very, very exciting times. This is really crazy, I mean, if you think about it. And I'm really excited, and probably you're very excited that you're doing this, and if I see so many people in the room, it's probably that, as you said, a lot of people are excited about it. And it turns out that this is going very fast, okay? So, let me present myself. I have a very academic background. I study, I did PhDs and stuff, a lot of degrees. Not always useful, but some of them, yes. And then I spent a lot of years during winter of AI in academia. And recently it's like 4 years ago, I joined AXA to try to push this and to have impact in real people. And you will see that this is really important, and this is where this humanizing AI will come. So I have very, very big, very long academic background, so I may sound a little bit as a teacher, please don't mind. So, one of the things that happened to me when I was a student is I got bitten by a spider. And I was, okay, it was the data science spider, right? And you know what, at the end of I don't know which one, but at the end of one of the chapters, there's an uncle of Spider-Man who says to him, you know, with great power, there must also come great responsibility. So my presentation today is going to be about that. I'm going to tell a little bit about great powers, and it's not just data science, but it's mostly around data science, from the spider, right? And I'm going to talk about responsibilities. Because you will see that actually data science, machine learning actually, is not exactly as human intelligence or learning like human beings. Okay? So then we talk a little bit about our research. So let's start with the first part, which is the superpowers. So superpowers, the first thing is that when I moved from academia and I went to the business, well, the idea was, okay, it's nice to be in a lab, but you know, we do papers and then we do conferences and then we go back and we do more papers. But what we like to have is impact. So this is impact, right? So AXA company, 100 million customers. So potentially what you do will impact 100 million people. Imagine if you're doing an algorithm and there's a problem in it, 100 million people can have a problem with it, right? To scale. It's not just one country, right? We are around, I don't know how many countries, 50 something, I don't know, it keeps moving. More than 50 countries, right? So it's all across the world, different cultures, different systems, different values. So this is really the thing. So here is the most strong engines and high potentials. And so this is really something, this is power. This is power that you indirectly leverage when you're a data scientist. Because you will play with data which comes from all these places around the world and will try to do things. So that's one. And also, like this is maybe true for all companies. What is a little bit particular so there's a figure, it's a recent figure, but what is a little bit particular, and I ask you to look at this side of this is the current situation. What was there a little bit particular in insurance is very diverse and actually touches all sides of your life. Okay, so you have property and casualty, which is like you insure your car, or if you have an accident, or your house. But then you have also health. This is kind of the size of the portfolio. We manage the money we get from our people, so we try to do life insurance. We do also savings. We manage also the money that is put in our things. There are some fiscal optimization things. We do also protection, so assistance, for example, to help people if there is a problem somewhere in the planet. We go and help this person. So there is a strong, it's very, very, very into this, in all aspects of the people's life, and actually your life. It's an insurer is playing things. So this is, again, this is very powerful because if you imagine, you can take information from one side, put it in another one, and so on, and you can play very tricky or, let's say, confusing problems. And this is why it's very regulated business. Because people want it to be the way society wants to be, and this is why there's regulation. Okay? And this is not the case for GAFAs. GAFAs, when they do machine learning, maybe this will change, but it's a lot about doing publicity, right? It's accuracy. I mean, if I improve the publicity I show in the first line in Google research by 0.01%, well, even if this makes some mistakes every so often, nothing happens, right? If I refuse to insure somebody for his loan, or a loan to make a business, well, it's a game-changing, it's life game-changing situation, right? Or if I refuse to an operation, for example, for this reason. So we have much stronger responsibility. Okay? So these superpowers, kind of like, so we have this super team, let's say. Maybe other people, AXA people, don't take it bad. So we have this team that we launched at group level, Center kind of excellence, which is research, engineering, and vision. And actually, our mission is, I will go quickly, but it's really about leveraging this technology. So just as a parenthesis, because you mentioned it, so we have also things like blockchain, we have things like platforms, analytics, and artificial intelligence, right? And the idea is to try how to create value with these things, and so we have an excellent center. And I wanted to show you a little bit what is the kind of technology that we are leveraging. Sorry, I'm kind of moving back and forth. So the kind of things we're doing, I don't know, so the kind of things we're doing is things like, and these are kind of our superpowers, we're able to do very nice conversational AI things, and actually driving, for example, driving the behavior of people, trying to reduce risk so that people do less risky things, or if they want, but that they realize that they're taking some risks. We have some advanced machine learning for typical things in insurance, right? If you think about insurance, it's true that insurance is taking data in the past and trying to predict something in the future, which is the risk. But the techniques which are used are very simple. And why is that? It's always because, since it's regulation, we try to understand what we're doing. We try to put things from the knowledge of the space, we try to be able to understand the models. And regulator wants to understand, and clients want to understand why, for example, you are being refused something, right? And so we're trying to put this advanced machine learning in pricing, underwriting, reserving, claims, fraud, these kind of things. Then we're trying to exploit, I would say, computer vision. And in the case of insurance, computer vision is a lot about getting to understand the world. Because the job of the insurer is to understand the risk. So we try to understand, I will show you an example, is to, for example, okay, you can think about OCR, so basically trying to transform scan documents into data, but you can think also satellite images to understand, for example, when there was a catastrophe, if our prediction model were correct, and then if not, we recalibrate. It's something, kind of things that we do in our lab. And then you can think about, we'll see in a second, like trying to analyze images of houses to understand better the risk that we're covering for reserving purposes. Then we're going into platform. We have blockchain, but we have also IoT. And this is, I think, the spirit of this thing is we'll develop platforms to go into this new world. Okay, the new world of streaming data. Okay, so the fact that when you want to insure Grab, people that work at Grab and work just a few hours a day, or maybe just or a few hours a week, how do you destructure the insurance too? right? How can you ensure these kind of things? And the idea is to be kind of more attached and more real time in the insurance, because if you try to do it globally, then it's impossible, right? You cannot insure somebody on health just because he drives 15 minutes, right? So we try to build platforms that interact in a more linear, in a more constant time with our new customers, let's say, which are on the platforms, right? No time to enter into this, but very interesting topic. And last, we are very interested into going into computable contracts, which is more an AI topic. Again, I won't enter into details, but it's try to automate a lot of very heavy processes and try to make, let's say, insurance when you go to insure, usually you go to see an insurer when there is a problem, right? And so we try to make this moment a little bit faster, a little bit simpler for the clients. Anyway, so to give you an example of our superpowers is this. So the kind of things we do is we do computer vision, and then we try to analyze. So either for subscription, so this is not a subscription case, but it's more a kind of a reserving case. We try to go on Google Street Map, and then we can try to analyze automatically how the building looks like, and this will enrich our data set. And we think about a lot of things. For example, you can know where the fire hose is. So if there is fire or something, how long is it going to take for a fire person and so on. And then there's a question about mutualization that you may asking yourself, okay, fine, does this mean that if I'm not located in the correct place, I'm going to pay more or not? This is not a question, this is a question for more how society wants to manage insurance. Here is more about reserving. So we have to understand better our risk to better reserve so that we are able to reimburse if something happens. But if society wants, we could be able to individualize the risk a little bit more. And happy to take questions on that later on. And then also the thing is, like, we try to look how high the buildings are, if they're swimming pools or not swimming pools, and all sort of things that you can gather. So it's really computer vision, it's really about getting new data. So it's a different way of looking at I would say, one interesting way of looking at artificial intelligence and machine learning. The other kind of superpower we have is that, and I kind of mentioned this quickly, but we do partnership with other companies, and we exchange data, and we try to make very interesting models to, again, try to understand better our customers and try to predict things. And it's very different if we're working with a bank or working with Uber and a BlaBlaCar, which is another platform, French platform for driving. But again, this is all about data and all about analyzing different type of data, flows of data, and so on. This is kind of the direction we're going. Okay? So I think I don't need to convince you about the fact that data science and machine learning brings really a lot of things. I just repeat it because I think it's always good to tell us ourselves that actually we can do really good things. But then I think we have great responsibilities, right? And great responsibilities is I want to take it not just like in a high-level vision, which is interesting too, but I'm not going to talk about this, I will just mention it. It's like, okay, what will happen with the market, right? Will people lose jobs and so on? I will try to talk to you about machine learning stuff, technical stuff, and its impact, and what are, let's say, the limitations and what we're trying to do about these limitations. So it's really going to be about everything. Because of that, I really have to do something, and please don't boo me, but I have to do a crash course on machine learning. But I'm doing it because I'm not sure everybody sees machine learning the way I'm going to explain it. So machine learning, you have a data set, some results, so supervised, of course, simplified. It's not a regression, it's just a data set with two classes, and then you have something which I call on purpose the robot. Okay, so this robot is machine learning optimization process, for example, is something that builds trees, for example. And it's usually, when we think about it, we think incorrectly, we think about it as being that something that actually tunes parameter. It's true it tunes parameter, but what is very important is that there is one algorithm that builds a model, and actually what is put in production is the model. and not the algorithm. Okay, so if you think about trees, there is something that builds trees, puts it here, and then the trees go there. And actually, this is where all the problems come from. I mean, all the problems I'm going to talk about comes from. Okay, it's nothing new, but I really want you to think about it in having something in production and something training it. Should it be whatever, like something that regress the parameters, finds the optimal parameters, whatever, and then there is a modeling parameters. Okay, so that's important. And this actually is at the heart of a message I will come back at the end, but I just wanted to show it to you, is that actually human intelligence, or the way humans learn, is not the way machines learn. Okay, this is one thing I would like you to remember, and we are going to follow this idea through my presentation. So let me back to this idea sorry, I'm moving all over the place now. So let me come back to this. Okay, so I have this production algorithm, and what's going to happen is that now, since this algorithm, this is the production one, okay? Since we have this algorithm is written by another algorithm. So what happens is that this thing is very complex, because the machine doesn't matter how complex, it can write very complex other algorithms. So this thing usually tends to be very complex. So it's very difficult to explain. Actually, it's even more complicated than just trying to explain. Second thing is, it's kind of difficult to regulate, because actually we're optimizing for some parameter, and this algorithm may be very smart and try to trick whatever we're trying to regulate here, may try to trick and regulate. And then, turns out, this is something we didn't know, but since this is very complex, we have strange things like adversarial attacks, right? It's strange, because everybody knows adversarial attacks? No? Okay, well, okay, come back. I come back on this, but what happens is that on an image, you can change a few pixels, and suddenly, the machine goes crazy, and will tell you something completely different. I don't know if I have a slide on that. Oh yes, I do. That's great. So, really good. So here, I have an adversarial attack. So this is really to illustrate. So this is the first one. I mean, there are more fancy ones, but this is the first one, so I like to do historical thing is, so we have an algorithm says, okay, this is a panda with some confidence. I add something called the mosquito noise, okay, some mosquito noise, which is multiplying by kind of a small factor, and then suddenly the machine is telling me, oh, that's great. This is a monkey with 99.3 confidence. This is really cool. Okay, now you think about the Nature paper, right? Oh, you have cancer. Oh, but they can change a pixel on the image and then suddenly it's not cancer, it's a giraffe. Oh, that's scary, right? So when there are big consequences, superpowers suddenly have super responsibilities. Changing a pixel can make a big difference. So these are the kind of problems I want to talk to you. Since I don't have time, this is one topic I'm addressing in the team. We're trying to see if we cannot, two things, actually, I will mention just one. We're trying to see if we cannot predict when the machine is going to make a mistake. So this is a kind of a tricky one, but we have some preliminary sources not published that we try to kind of predict when the machine is going to go crazy like this. And it's true in images, and we're trying to see if it's true when you have structured data. Sometimes it's also true. Sometimes, not always. Depends on the complexity of the model, which is in there. Okay, so that's one topic of my researching. The second topic is let me see. Yeah, maybe let me see what I do. Okay, but it's too much text, so I don't want you to read. Maybe I go here. The second topic is about regulating. So I will give you just a high-level explanation of this, because again, I want to focus on one, and the one I'm going to focus on is the explain. Okay, you will see that each of these things can be really sophisticated when you start thinking about it. So the regulation one, what we're trying to do is that regulators try to do things which we want the algorithms to do. So one of the things we want to do, for example, in France, is we want to say, okay, we want to make no difference between a woman and a man, a male and a female. That's what we say. So then what we do is we say, okay guys, very nice. We just take the variable out. With this feature, we take it out. Very good. Let's try to learn. Well, if you take a smart algorithm and a lot of variables and features, the system will come up with some kind of cool things. Like, for example, we take the variable of, we take, for example, the brand of your car, the color of your car, and you will see suddenly that small cars with pink colors tend to have cars which are marketed for women, tends to have woman drivers, kind of strange. And so if you think even bigger, maybe we can look at the basket and then you say that this person buys lipstick. Well, it can happen as a man, but you start finding correlations. So now, as I told you, this has all been developed just for accuracy purposes, and it's very difficult to control. So what we do in my team is we try to control this, and the way we do it is we try to do adversarial learning, so we try to fight. We try to force the algorithm to predict two things simultaneously, predicts, in our case, the risk, and simultaneously the gender. And then we punish the algorithm when it predicts correctly the gender. Punish means putting the parameters in such a way he cannot differentiate a man and a woman, and then predict correctly the risk. There's an optimization problem, kind of a tricky one, and this is what we're trying to do. So I just give you a high-level idea of what we do. It's tricky, and if you have questions, I can come back to that, but so that's kind of a second problem, which is very, very strong. And as you see, this is really humanizing, because society wants this not to be the case, right? We want to have that people pay the same price. And even defining what does it mean is difficult, right? So, for example, in our case, we define it, but we have actually a research partnership to try to go further, but we define it as the conditional probability of having whatever we want to predict. Conditional, the sensitive variable, in this case, a male, equals the conditional probability of having X knowing it's a female, right? But we could define it differently, right? So at some point, you have to translate it to mathematics, and this gives you some responsibility too. Okay, so this is the second topic, and and all ones. So let me go, because I see time is flying. Let me go now to the interpretability thing. Okay, so I took, this is actually, I will show you the picture at the end, but I look very smart, but actually this is all people doing the work, I'm just the boss. So let me go back to interpretability. So this time, I tell you another story about the image. This time, I tell you, you know what, guys? Yeah, you have cancer. Okay, well, the small thing, that's nice. But you know what, we have to cut your arm. Well, you may ask, why? I mean, are you really sure? Give an explanation. It's explanation's not easy to give, right? It's a deep learning algorithm. Okay, so how do we explain this? So maybe as a society we can decide that, fine, if something is very accurate, it's a black box, good, it's very accurate, so we're happy. But maybe if it's a loan, maybe you say, why should it be so complex to have a loan or not? So I want a simple model. But as an insurer, maybe you want to differentiate. So you try to fight and try to go for differentiation. So there is a fight between somehow accuracy and performance, right? So let me illustrate this with a little bit more machine learning kind of thing. So I have to state the reasons. Well, anyway. So there is actually inherently somehow a trade-off between accuracy and interpretability. If you have a very simple model, well, because it's simple, so very few variables, monotone, so monotone meaning that one variable goes up, the model predicts either higher or lower, well, it tends to be kind of simple to understand, so interpretable. So linear model is an example, a simple tree is an example. On the other hand, if you have random forest, or CNN inception or whatever, deep learning, then what happens, well, it's more complicated to understand what the thing is doing, right? Although there are trees, right? But in one case, when you take a decision, you go through one of them, and you have sort of like a rule, okay? okay? And then in the other one, you have tons of rules, and then you have tons of rules, and these rules goes all over the place, right? And then they're aggregated. And this makes these models much more accurate, because we're going to fit much better what we're trying to fit, right? If we say we have to be monotone, well, this means that, well, if something is not monotone, we cannot predict. We have to pay the price for that. If we think about the rules, if we have just one rule, rules will split the space in dimensions which are parallel to the dimensions. So here, I don't know what it is, but the status of existing checking account is smaller than that. So this dimension, we have a straight line, because it's smaller or bigger, right? So if you think about the diagonal in that space, you cannot predict. While if you have this, because you're going to sum up all these things together, then suddenly you're going to be able to predict in the diagonal, right? Much easier. So you're going to have a lot of things predicting all over the place, and in average, you're going to learn on the diagonal, right? So that's a little bit of the situation, right? And this gives a lot of discussions. Lots of discussion all over the place. So people are really worried, right? So you have papers everywhere, like, can AI be taught to explain itself? Artificial, and this is not like stupid, this is New York Times. Then you have Pixels, this is a French one. So we have all over the place, Forbes. We have even people saying, for example, this is Wired, don't make artificial intelligence stupid. So don't take these simple models, but maybe in the name of transparency, right? So this is going all over the place, this debate. And regulator also has something to say about it. So you have all countries, and by the way, Singapore is one of the best ones in terms of insurance regulation, banking, a very good one, but you have all over the place, like European Commission, French SCPR, GDPR, all these people are saying, okay guys, let's try to be nice, let's try to be good. But it's not really obvious how to do it. We have to aim at, and this is why these things usually are not regulation, besides GDPR. They're not regulation, but are more either the strongest case scenario is directives, and if not, it's just kind of guidelines and trying to say to people, okay, let's try to be good. Okay? So now, well, we have now a problem, right? Because now we have this confrontation between accurate and interpretable, right? And so, well, it's kind of complicated word to choose. And so what we think, actually, and actually I ignored a slide before, but what we think this is a wrong discussion. Okay? That's one discussion we'll show in a minute, but before that, there's another thing which gets mixed. It's transparency. So very often in this regulation, and actually the paper, the Wired paper, was like, oh, in the name of transparency. But actually transparency is not making something explainable. Okay, so let's say I have my example, okay, and then I'm transparent. So I may not want to be transparent because maybe there is competition, you know, I'm not sure, and I don't want to show my secret formula. But transparency is I give you the model. And I say, hey guys, take the model. No problem, I give you all the parameters. You're a client. I refuse to insure your loan, but fine. Here, I have 5 million parameters. Take it. I even write you the equation. So I give you a book. Take the equation. Do whatever you want with it. It doesn't help, right? So the problem is not simple because now it means that being transparent doesn't solve the problem first. And second, it means that you will have to somehow simplify the complexity into something else. And now you have to be sure that what you're simplifying is not completely different of what you're saying, because then you could be lying or manipulating, right? So it's a difficult problem. Okay? So our bet is to say, well, so how to solve this problem, right? We have something very performant, and we don't want to give up with performance, so our approach, and we're not the only one about doing this, is to say, well, maybe we don't have to explain everything, because the algorithm is very good by explaining everything. Maybe we can just explain a little part of the model. And in that case, we can make this little part of the model kind of more interpretable. So for example, let's, as I said, take just a part, make it simple, and this is what we're going to explain. So explain, for example, one decision. So this is exactly what my research team is doing. So we're trying to not explain everything, but just explain one decision, the decision that is for you. This doesn't solve everything, and actually there are other problems that come, and I won't talk about them. But for example, for the regulator, well, that's cool, but they're not going to check all the examples in the world, right? So the regulator may still say, wait a minute, this is not very cool because you explain to the client, but you're not going to explain to me how the thing is working, right? And I have no guarantees that this is going to work all the time. But still, it's a step forward. So how does it look like with a computer vision example? Can be, we most of the time don't do, but since I started with the computer vision, so this is our headquarters for those who know. And we use, I think, Inception 3, right? And we try to do this classification. And we got 3 classes. We got building, minivan, and traffic light for this one. And now we want to explain, let's say. And it's a particular case because actually your features is the image itself, right? So what we do is we try to find what are the parts of the image which kind of make this decision locally. Okay, so then sometimes you can have strange things, behavior, but locally you can, this is why this was decided as being a building. And then you say you have some stuff which votes for, which is building a structure, and then you have things which voted against, which are kind of the cars. Okay, so it gives you kind of intuition, but of course it's an example which is positive, so then you may say, space another one which works. I have a minivan, of course, because, okay, it was not a minivan, but it was a car, but anyway, but then you have traffic lights. And then, suddenly, you will see, if you look at the traffic light example, you will see there's some yellow stuff, there are some cars, there is something vertical, and of course it's not connected, but that's how the deep learning Inception 3 is built, right? So it gives you some intuition of why this algorithm is not working. Of course, this can be deceptive if you put it in a strange context in which you are trying to differentiate, for example, wolves from dogs, and then what will be differentiating is not the dog, but the background, for example, because actually they do look the same, but the most differentiating thing is the background. So there is a problem of locality, but still, this is a step forward into this direction, right? So, yes, so this is exactly what we're doing, and let me go a little bit step further. Actually, when you think about interpretability, and I didn't know how good you are, I mean, how aware are you of this topic, and so a lot of people, this is start becoming kind of famous in data science communities, because of course, business usually when you try to do something, ask you, okay, wait a minute, that's very cool, but why? But actually, the why is not just classification. Actually, we do, and all people are doing. What can be done to change the prediction? That's our why. That's what we're trying to explain. But there are a lot of other things that you try to explain. You can say, okay, what has been learned by the model? How does the model work? You can have why a particular prediction has been made. Where is the correct? Where is the model correct? When are you making mistakes? When are you not making mistakes? So there are a lot of questions on why. And everybody is focusing, kind of, it's fashionable to be in this. What can be done, change prediction, and we too, actually I have to be honest, we are also only in this part, but there is a lot of other things. So it's a complex topic and an interesting one. So now let me deep dive into this one. Okay, now that we said, fine, we want to explain the model. Cool, we have a model, we want to explain. Now what happens is, you have two ways of doing it. You can do something which is ad hoc. So you take a model, let's say XGBoost, and then you go through each of the trees and you additively add something. Either the Guinea, or you add, I don't know, how many people are going through a branch or something, or how many branches do you have. The variable counts 1 every time you use the variable. And each of these things are very tricky to interpret because, for example, continuous variables are going to be used very often, and categorical ones not very often. So this is one thing that people are working on. I'm not really convinced. But it has the advantage of to have a full fidelity of what the algorithm is doing. Algorithm is really doing what you're trying to measure. What we try to do, so that's why it's in yellow, we try to model the black box behavior. So we say, okay, the black box is a black box, don't touch it, but let's try to understand the behavior. So it's like when you drive a car, I don't try to explain to you how the engine works. But what you want to know is when you turn left or when you turn right, it will turn left and so on, and how you brake. That's what we want to know. So it's a little bit the same idea. We are going to sample the black box, and then from the sample, we're going to have some problems. For example, the fact that things are going to be or not the same. And actually, these domains are rich. It's very rich, and let me go a little bit fast, really fast. There are things really, I mentioned most of the things. So there's more technical things like postdoc specific. This is postdoc agnostic, and now this is the part, the black box model approach. And then you have prototype selection, sensitivity analysis, and then you have surrogate models. Then you have global surrogate models, and then you have local ones. And this is what is today the most trendy one. Okay, but there's a lot of things. But you have Lime and Sharp, these are the ones who are really, really fashionable. So let me focus on these ones. What these guys are doing is they are sampling. Yes, let's look here. What these guys are doing is they're going to sample the model around whatever decision was taken. So you sample it. And then you try to build a linear model. And this linear model is going to tell you, okay, this is how more or less the frontier looks like. And so there are some tricks and recipes in there so that you get sort of a decision. So what you're doing is actually you're having a little model for the decision you made. And you train this on the output of the black box. So it's not the reality, right? You're explaining the algorithm, not the reality. That's another topic again, but no time to explain. So this is what these guys are doing. And if you're interested, you can go on the GitHub. It's some guys from Washington University. And so what my research team has shown, and I don't know how many people knows Lime. Okay, a few. So be careful with Lime. And this is what we show with my research team. I think something's missing here. Oh no, I didn't want to show it. Yes, so with what's happened with Lime, there are some issues. And the issue is the locality. Actually, when you try to sample, one thing that you try to know is, okay, how I'm going to sample the space? How local I'm supposed to be? Should it be very local? Should it be not that local, right? So we had a careful look at this. And what happens is that actually Lime, this is an artificial data set. We try on real data sets too, but in a data set, this artificial one, you see that actually it's not very sensitive. Lime is not very sensitive because it usually tries to has a sampling which goes very live. It has a kernel, a Gaussian kernel, and this Gaussian kernel is very large, and the sampling is very big. Okay, so well, then you may say, okay, that's very nice, but the problem is that if you have a sampling very large, then suddenly somebody can say, well, you're stupid. You should have chosen the right kernel, right? You could say, okay, so well, you have two questions then. The first one is, okay, how I know the kernel I'm supposed to use from the beginning? Because you don't know, right? I have an example, I don't know what kernel to use. But even though, if you know which kernel to use, we show that this is not optimal. And this is a little bit our work, and why this is so. So this is what I show here, actually. Is what we show here is that actually we try to compare the way we do. I will come back in a second, but when we look at the things, the local fidelity, so how well we fit the model, you can see that actually if you take the best, so this is a reduced kernel width, so we compute the correct kernel, the best one that you can have for your surrogate, and this is the blue line, and actually with the way we do, without knowing anything, we have more or less the same. And what is very impressive is that what we say is that if you are close to the boundary, I don't know if it is what we're doing, but you can see us. No, this is the way we do it, that actually we say that there is a challenge, because when you're far away from a boundary, very far away, actually explaining locally, if you're very local far away, what happens is that you're going to explain things which don't make sense. You're going to say, okay, go this direction or go this direction. Linear model is going to go all over the place. When you're close to the decision, then every direction is important because you are very close and you may change your class very quickly. So what we propose to do is we go the closest border detection. So we try to find a point at the border, and then we do local sampling, okay? And then on this local sampling, we make a surrogate, okay? And this changed completely because then we take the standard formula from to be fair, so we take the standard formula from Lime, and actually this is very impressive because actually fidelity-wise, we are very good, although we're far away from the point. So we're sampling not in the point of the decision, we're sampling at the decision border. So, and you see it's very, very, very reflective. Okay, so I think this is time for me to finish. Just to tell you that we do a lot of other things. We do adversarial machine learning, contrafactual explanation, and we work on making libraries. For the time being, we have a library that is for internal use because we're making sure there are no bugs and so on, but we believe these topics need to be open source. So we're going to open source most of the things. We do papers, so if you're interested in this paper, you can download. It's on archive. It's also at ICML. And then we do tutorials and training. And actually, what's very magic is that actually it's very useful for the business. It's not just to be ethics, but actually it's very interesting because this is trust and knowledge for the business. So they are going to trust your models because you're going to be able to explain. It's transparency for the clients, how decisions are being made. For law and ethics, so we want to implement things. We can see that things are implemented the way we want. It's good for debugging. I mean, audit, of course, but it's good for debugging if your model's not working, and then you're like, oh, why is this thing predicting this strange thing? Well, that's weird. So you can understand yourself your model and can debug. And then we have some papers on that, on fraud prevention, because now you can imagine that, for example, somebody's trying to attack your system, and then you can try to see, oh, he's trying to cross the border, and then you can try to understand how the person tried to cross the border. It's a little bit more complicated to explain, but it goes around these lines. So, let me conclude. So as I said before, this is not my work, unfortunately. I would love to do a PhD thesis again. This is my team, so we're around 12 people. Showcase here, who is working a lot on putting these things on outsourcing and doing partnership with academic people. So if you're interested, you can talk. I talk about most of the topics, but I didn't talk about smart system and also design research on behavioral. So that's the thing. So I thought, what are the messages I would like you to remember? Okay. I have two ideas. What thing? First one, great power, great responsibility. That's really important. Really, I mean, if you are not the people who are taking care of these issues and trying to make these topics pushing forward, who is going to do? Because suddenly, it's a tech problem. It's not a regulator problem. The regulator doesn't understand a quarter of what I said. Okay, so it's really in the hands of people who are doing and using machine learning today to make sure that we don't go crazy with the stupid things. And second thing, if you think about it, actually, human intelligence, machine intelligence is very different. In the interpretability, I can do the analogy because it's obvious that if you ask somebody why he did something, he will come up with an explanation. Maybe some people are studying this. Is it the real explanation of how they arrived to the conclusion or not? But it's an important one. It's one. But if you think about adversarial attacks, I mean, we're very good at predicting stuff. You change few pixels and suddenly this is an order class. This is not. Well, I show you the example with the panda. It's very different. So don't think AI and machine learning, it's like human learning. And yes, oh, sorry. And so I think that if you have bitten too by a spider, just contact us. And there is the director of the AXA Rep Singapore. He was in the front. And then there is Celine, who is in AXA Singapore operations. So if you want to do stuff which are more applied, so she's there.
Like real business case.
Real business case. Not just theory. Not just theory. Thank you for your attention, guys.
Thank you, Marcin, for the amazing talk. We learned a lot about interpretability and how applicable it is and how the business really cares. Anyone have any questions? Hands on, Paul.
So my question is basically, do you actually have use cases where the business has accepted that as one of the key requirements for your algorithm? In the sense that, I mean, I find it very difficult to justify any kind of degradation of accuracy to the business for any kind of ethical reasons.
So I think you're trying to tell me that, can I convince the business that I do a less accurate algorithm?
Yes.
Okay, so there are two answers to your questions. First is that what we propose, you don't touch the black box. So it's the most accurate possible. So it's going to stay the accuracy that you have. So, and I mean in interpretability, right? And then you reduce, and then actually we explain the decisions. This they love, because then you're giving something more, even if they think it's useful, but we're giving something more, and you're not giving up anything. The question may apply then on the biases, right? So in the bias case, yeah, sure. So nobody's going to use it until the regulator comes and says, hey guys, that's very nice, but what I meant in my regulation was not that I want to have, that you trick me with all variables, but what I want is that you guarantee me that the probability is equal to this, and then all businesses are going to be my friends. So it's just a question, do we want what society we want to live in, and it's going to be enforced through regulation. So it's a business never going to want to reduce accuracy for explainability. Besides, and this is not so regulated space for accuracy in the regulated space, for example, when the pricing of stuff, well, actually they tell you, no, we're not going to use algorithm, even if it's better. I have seen that, okay, because we cannot explain it, the regulator is not going to like it. So we have sort of different ways, I didn't enter into this, different ways to try to control. So we have a black box which does a little part of the process, and then you can control that. But it's not the full deep learning, the full XGBoost, the full whatever, predicting something. It's just a little part, and then you can control, because if it goes crazy, then you say you just kill it. You max or min or whatever, and you kill the decision of the thing. So, yeah. So, what we're trying to do is not give up. But in the case of bias, it's sure you're going to give up, because this is the point, right? The point is that you give up for the good for society. That's how it works. I mean, this is what we want. And actually, we optimize. So we actually, between doing a simple model and doing a complex model with the constraint, the complex model with the constraint is better than the simple one. So that's also our story.
Yes, over here.
You encounter times in which your simple model have a desync with the complex model conclusions. Your simple
Disagree?
model, yes.
Yeah, of course. Of course.
And how do you manage that?
So all the time, actually, so complex models, so all the time. It can happen, and there are some people who have this theory, I'm not convinced, but there are some famous professors from American universities who have better, let's say, better positions than me, who believe that actually there is a space, so it's very strange, so it's a space in which actually all models have more or less, there are some cases of examples, and they think it's most of them, there is a large space in which all the algorithms do more or less the same. And you see this sometimes in Kaggle, right? Everybody very quickly arrives to some accuracy, and then beam, stop. Okay, and then the winner wins by 0.0001. Okay? Well, in that case, it's true that complex model doesn't add too much. And again, we should be a little bit careful, not going too complex if you go into production. Okay? And sometimes actually losing accuracy, to answer a different way your question is, sometimes we are very keen on giving up on accuracy, but for production reasons. It's better to have something in production which is less accurate than not having anything in production. So sometimes you give up on accuracy there. But the nature of a complex model is that actually the model, it doesn't mistakes when the simple does. So by definition, most of the time when there is a difference in performance, which is in my case often, but seems to be for other people not the case, in that case, of course, we do big differences, and we do manage actually our algorithm. The complex one is correct. That's how it works. So that's
I'm sort of curious about the claim that algorithm selection will only degrade performance in response to regulatory pressure.
yes.
I'm thinking about a different example, which is promotional pricing by telcos. At one point I lived in the UK a decade ago, and BT was advertising that they were, as a differentiating factor, that they were extending the same pricing to all of their customers, not just to the new ones.
Yeah.
Usually they'll be to provide commercial pricing only to customers who are churning. I can't think of a good way to apply this to insurance, but it would seem to me that there really are cases where there'd be commercial pressures, not at the underwriting level, but at the market access and sales enablement level, to use less accurate algorithms as a commercial driver. Has that come up, or is that?
No, that's true. But I'm not an economist, and I'm not used to predict the past. I'm just a data scientist. So when I see the data, I will answer. It's true. I mean, there are factors. You could believe that, for example, saying, okay, look, you know what, guys? We're going to do very simple models for data science. Very simple, very simple. Everybody's going to understand. You do a good marketing campaign. Well, maybe you get a lot of people because it's simple. You know what the factors are, and people come. And then you have bigger volume. You make less margin because actually you're worse selection. Maybe you make more money, but I think that if you think about competition, it's difficult to predict, but think about competition. I mean, insurance is fighting with another insurance, right? It's price competition, and people are quite price sensitive. And actually, the market is in such a way that when you enter the insurance, actually, the insurance loses money, right? So when you know that, selecting the right people, and this is historical, right? Because everybody's trying to figure out the best price and so on. So if you think about that, I think finding moving from this situation to a situation in which I do a very simple thing and then come is difficult. But you can have niche markets, right? So for example, in France, there is an insurer that says, actually, in our case, it's very simple. We're not like this big insurance, very complex. We're very simple, but they target a very, very, very specific population. And then, of course, it's very simple because it's just for these guys, right? So yeah, and in that case, they do a very simple model. Everything is very simple. And they get a part of the market. It's more complicated when you have more diversity and so on and so on. But yeah, so accuracy is not necessarily, accuracy is true. The fight of accuracy is you have a product, something on production, and you want to do incremental gain in margin. So Google has an algorithm publishing something. Well, if you predict better, you're better, right? You make money automatically the same. If we have a production algorithm for fraud detection, and we predict better fraud, well, we catch more fraud, right? So it's incremental in this case. Now, competing to a newer business model, completely different, then accuracy may not be the single factor. But at the end of the day, you have to pay, no? Insurance, you sell, it's very easy to sell insurance, no? Just make it cheap. But then, and what happens is that then you want to get reimbursed, right? At some point. And if you make it too cheap, at one point you are not able to reimburse anymore. You go bankrupt. It's not very cool. Yeah.
Actually, that points to an example in insurance where what I'm suggesting is actually occurring. It's occurring because of the difficulties a century ago of pricing risk, and that's health insurance in the US.
Yeah.
What's occurring is it's not individual risk assessment.
Yeah.
The insurers are assessing the risk from the entire body of employees and the employer.
Yeah.
And therefore, although there are differences, they're much less important than the transaction costs are.
Yes.
So
Fortunately, we're not in the health business in the US.
No, I wasn't suggesting that was a model way to run an insurance industry.
It occurs to me that it's tough. It's tough. US is a tough one.
But just so there are cases where the precision of the model, and therefore the underwriting model, is not in fact the decisive factor. That the transaction costs to this day remain decisive in that entire market, with a whole lot of problems.
I totally agree.
Anyone else? Okay, one last question.
Yeah, so I just wanted to quickly return back to the question of accuracy, because and regulation. So what your proposed solution is basically that eventually regulators would come in and step in and enforce this on the companies. Just two questions regarding that. One of them is that basically I think you said the regulators don't get it, and I'm not sure how long it takes for them to eventually get it. And in the meantime,
I can answer that one, yes.
And the second one is basically even if that happens, how would you do to make sure that the companies basically follow that particular regulation in terms of basically auditing the model somehow, or the output of models. I'm not sure how you think about that.
Yes, very excellent question. Very, very good questions, and this is questions a lot of people are asking. So I think that likely or unlikely, I don't know, whatever, is I think that what happens today is that these things are regulated, right? So what you have to understand is that what is not going to happen for the moment, and there is a question towards GAFAs and so on, but for the moment, an insurer which is regulated cannot put a complex model in stuff which is in the middle of predicting something. Why? Because if the regulator does not understand, and this is more or less true in all the countries, not all, there are some certain countries which regulator kind of weird. Most of the time, the guy, if he doesn't understand, you don't go on production. Okay, forget about it. So that's first question. So the scenario in which you are going to have something very strange going on is not going to happen. Now, by the time you figure this out, that maybe we should look at this differently, yes, then they will say, okay, well, look guys, this is the way, and usually when they come out with a new regulation, for example, if you think about solvency, which is kind of how you are supposed to calculate your reserves, in, I don't know if it's, I think it's European, they give you a formula, the standard one, they tell you, okay, this is the way, standard way of doing it, implement that. And then, if you want to be smarter and make more money, well, do whatever you want, but then we have to audit this, and you have to tell us, so the company has to tell the regulator how he can audit what complex system is. So there are ways, I mean, the insurance knows how to work with the regulation, and so I don't think this is going to happen. Now, this being said, there is a small guys or GAFAs around, and these people are not regulated. Okay? And then the question is, let's say an Amazon, a Google becomes a broker, so he's not an insurer. Now he's trying doing strange things, complex stuff and so on. This is not regulated. So the question is, how fast regulation is going to understand that there is a value chain and that maybe we need to regulate beyond the sector. So so the questions are there, but it's not the problem. I believe it's not going to come from insurance. It's going to move more from disruptors on the side, really. So I hope it's not going to be. I mean, let's hope that regulation catches up. But honestly, in insurance, what I have seen, regulators are always slow because what is difficult. I tried. So to be honest, last thing. But so I said, okay, guys, these regulators have no clue. Okay, I said to myself, okay, I study a lot, smart guy. And I say, I'm going to write down what they need to do. It's not simple, because it's simple to fix problems. It's more difficult to make a law, which is supposed to work and run all the time on things you haven't thought yet. So that's also why you're always a little bit late, because by the time you understand the problem, you have already people, like, disrupting all over the place, and then you're always a little bit late. So even by definition, you're always a little bit late. Well, with that, hope I tried to answer your question. Thank you very much for your attention. And well, yes, no, one thing. I'm trying to launch my Twitter account. I'm just very bad. So if you can follow me, so I can have more than 5 followers of my team, it would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you, AXA. Thank you, Bridge. Thanks everyone for joining us today. I think the AXA team will be hanging around for a bit longer. For those of you guys who have benefited from the amazing pizza and drinks, please do pick up your litter and bring it out to the trash can so it's easier for everyone. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.